Adam Gillette is back. He's president of Accuracy in Media, AIM.org, has some new reporting on teachers' union activities that shouldn't surprise us if public school is anything you've been following over the years, and I certainly have been. I think that saving the country in large measure, keeping young people from getting excited about the likes of people like Zoran Mandami is going to require a full, wholesale rethinking of the way we educate young people in this country. Adam, welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me back.
I mean, the fact of the matter is you don't get a Mandami, you don't get young people excited about an Islamist communist unless an education system has failed our youth. I'm convinced of it.
Well, I would argue that it's actually succeeded. The problem is it succeeded at a goal that you and I do not share. You and I would like to live in a world in which K through 12 education existed to teach reading, writing, arithmetic. You can learn about communism, fascism, socialism, but you shouldn't be taught these are great, wonderful things for society and for humanity. Instead, we have a system that is devoted to taking young people and turning them to activists. People bemoan college professors radicalizing students. They're radical when they get there.
Yes, and that is so important. And this story today, top teachers union inviting pro-violence activists to shape public school curricula. You should know this, and I hope by now, post-COVID, people do. Public school, fine if that's your choice, but that's why school choice is growing, and I think the resistance to school choice is weakening. It's almost becoming non-existent. I think some people will always choose public school because it's the path of least resistance, or it's easiest, or it's cheapest, or whatever. But people should know that as long as public school exists and is run by the NEA, it's going to be chock-a-block full of this kind of radical crap.
And that's exactly right. We see that the laws they pass to regulate what's happening in public school are generally worse than worthless because they accomplish nothing. These radical teachers and administrators, you think they care about the law? And instead, these laws provide a false sense of security. I'm not for book bans, but I do believe there are some things that aren't appropriate for kindergarten or fifth grade or even ninth grade. Well, when you ban certain books from the library per se, I've learned going undercover in hundreds of school districts that teachers simply store those same books in the classroom, which is locked outside of school hours. So you can poke around the library all you want. These folks are ahead of you every step of the way. They are professionals at deception, professionals at radicalization, because they view themselves as evangelicals on a mission to get these far-left ideas into the minds of children.
Just as we're talking, it occurs to me, and I've shared this a few times on the show, my young sons, ages 20 and 19, and I've noticed among particularly young, maybe white men specifically, I don't know if this is always true, but this is just my anecdotal observation, the radical nature of public school, and my boys came up through public school primarily. My daughter, on the other hand, we decided to shift gears, and we went with a private Christian school. I wished we'd done it for all three, but you live, you learn, and my boys are great. But my point in bringing them up, Adam, is that I think they were soaking in this, marinating in this garbage, this woke crap for a long time, where their mother and me were not particularly aware of it or paying attention to it. And what it has done is actually, in many ways, taken younger men in this country and made them more conservative, but in some cases, I actually think made them pretty full of grievance and anger at what the country has become under this left-wing institutional thinking. I actually think unwittingly, the American left hijacking our education system has created a generation of young men my son's age who are going hard the opposite way, too. I think there's something to that. I can't prove it, but that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Well, I feel that happens in the unique, wonderful scenarios in which you've got a parent who has a great, close relationship with their children, a parent who's actually educating their children. For many parents who simply outsource it and allow these administrators and educators who are radicals to push all these ideas into the minds of their kids without hearing anything to the contrary, well, the result is going to be dramatically different. And as I've said so many times, you've heard me say, I go to deep red districts in deep red states, and these administrators brag to me about how progressive the curriculum is from an equity point of view. They brag to me about teaching things like America is systemically racist and capitalism is inherently racist in math class. So yes, if they've got a parent at home who they have a good relationship with, telling them, no, this is garbage, this isn't true, your teacher's well-intentioned, but they're absolutely wrong, well, you can get that definitely young men and young women who are radicalized against what's being forced upon them. But for those who don't get that contrarian viewpoint from someone they trust, I'm incredibly worried.
You guys at Accuracy in Media, there's a piece today at the Washington Examiner. Top Teachers Union invites pro-violence activists to shape public school curricula. The Zinn Education Project and its parent organization Rethinking Schools. Alert, alert, alert. Parents should be aware of this. We've talked about it before, but just so people know, if you've got a kid in public school or your grandkids or your nieces, nephews, whoever, your neighbor kids, can you speak to this, the Zinn Education Project and this parent organization, Rethinking Schools, what they're about?
Well, for those who don't know, Howard Zinn is a Marxist historian. I don't say that lightly. He would probably describe himself that way. He famously or infamously wrote a book called The People's History of the United States, which is American history through the perspective of someone who thinks that capitalism is inherently racist and that America is systemically racist. Well, you're probably going to say, if I saw that in my kid's classroom, if I saw that as a homework assignment, I'd call up that principal so fast. Well, 90% of American school districts use a classroom curriculum service called Newsela. Newsela partners with current events outlets. They partner with the Southern Poverty Law Center. They partner with a 1619 project that claims that we fought the American Revolution to preserve slavery, which is ridiculous. And they partner with the Zinn Education Project. So if your kid comes home with a Zinn thing, you're going to say, what the heck? But if they come home, it's going to say Newsela on the masthead, so you're going to be none the wiser. That's how clever these folks are. You could pass laws, you could try to micromanage it, but it's like playing whack-a-mole, and they stay one step ahead of you every time.
And the NEA, by the way, fully aware of it and endorses it. This is the thing that I think, a lot of older teachers, my mother was a public school teacher for 30 years and my wife taught for 10 years. And I have many friends who are close to retirement age or are newly retired in teaching. Good teachers who genuinely wanted to teach kids. And I know that there are, many who are that way. And I never like to castigate an entire profession, but it's just not even in discussion or debate anymore. Most young people, full of the bilge that you and I have just been talking about, go into public education schools, higher education, to become teachers. They're activists, right, Adam? I mean, they're not there to teach. They're actually there to preach and lead a movement, a religious cult-like movement to the left. It's activism. It's not education for most of these younger people.
Well, that's only about 99% of them, to be fair. But the problem is, even the remaining 1% who want an ideologically free education for your child, well, they have to report to those administrators. They have to report to those equity officers. And many people would say, well, they don't have equity officers in my kid's school. Fort Worth ISD in Deep Red, Texas. Fort Worth ISD is one of 20 different school districts in the Fort Worth metropolitan area. They have a dozen full-time, non-classroom members of their equity team. And yes, they've got laws banning this now. All that meant for these people is they printed new business cards, got new job titles, and they look over the curriculum. They look over those teachers, and they make sure that these educators, even the well-intentioned ones, are towing the party line each and every day and focusing on pushing those progressive ideas into every facet of public education. That's what we're dealing with in 2025. It's not even like what it was like when you and I were in school 20, 30 years ago, let alone what it was like when our grandparents might have been in school. It's a dramatically different environment focused on indoctrination.